So what is a business acquisition?
Yeah, I suppose typically it's where you're buying another company, but sometimes that can look different. So you could be purchasing just part assets of that company, so a division or set department, where you're looking at an asset purchase perhaps, as opposed to a full acquisition of 100% of the equity of the business.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction in a way, is that you don't have to buy the entire business. You can look to buy maybe a section of the trading assets of a business, and they'll carry different risk profiles. Why would a business choose to grow through acquisition?
In my mind, oftentimes it's a bigger market share, it could be geographical advantage, it's just rapid expansion. You might have new innovation, new ideas from the new business, in terms of new products, new services you can expand on the market, just a really quick growth really.
I think probably the only thing I'd add is maybe diversification and the spreading of risk. So you might want to branch out into a completely different sector and spread your risk that way.
Yeah.
So Niall, what are the biggest risks to the buyer in an acquisition process?
One of the biggest risks would be the strategy. Does it align with your current, key attributes of your business, and whether, the business you're buying, do they have the same sort of values as yours? I suppose structure as well is a key one. You need to ensure if you're buying a business for a bigger group, where it sits within that structure, and sort of how the key personnel work between the two, certainly the shareholders, directors, that sort of thing, and how they all align with the key structure at the end. And then finally, I would say the price, making sure the price is right. If the price isn't right, I mean, you should find out within the due diligence process, should give you a bit more of an insight. And equally, risk mitigation would probably be a key factor as well as a final point.
So I think really the only way to get comfort over whether a target is the right fit for you is to carry out some due diligence, and essentially you can think of that as the process in which you gain comfort over the risks of a deal. And I often think of that in a real world analogy of buying a car. So there's a very big difference between going to buy a car yourself and sort of kicking the tyres, but not really understanding what you're buying, as opposed to maybe taking a mechanic or a garage with you and having them check over the car for you. You gain an extra level of comfort, and that kind of is the due diligence process for buying a business.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd add to that in terms of you're bringing the experts in to analyse the company from start to finish, and in doing so, I mean, it can not only give you comfort you're buying something correct, but also it does give you comfort in a worst case scenario. If there's something you find that would completely put you off buying the business, it's well worth forking out the money to do so.
Often out of our due diligence process, we maybe renegotiate the terms of the deal. It might not be a deal breaker. We might actually just renegotiate what you're going to pay for the business, but often we find that our value is added in those stages.
So James, talk me through the process of acquiring a business from start to finish.
So one thing I'd recommend before you get started is to make sure that you have a clear strategy in mind for your business. You want to know where you're going. Once you've got that process in place, I would then say the first thing is to identify a business that you think fits that acquisition criteria. Once you've found that target, we would then say, let's negotiate, let's find out if there can be a deal put in place. Often we can. Once you've got a deal structure in place, often referred to as like the heads of terms, we would then look to carry out due diligence, make sure that we're mitigating risks where possible. Once we're happy with DD, I would say the next stage is to try and formalise the arrangement in contracts, often referred to as a sale and purchase agreement or an SPA. And once that's signed, the acquisition is done.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also add, it can be quite a lengthy process, so it's often key at the beginning to just highlight to an individual who's acquiring a business that it can take some time. Even the best case scenarios, it could be anywhere from 6 months if you've got a really good buyer instead of really aligned and want to get the deal done. Anywhere up to 2 years or more if things really do start to get a bit more tense, I suppose. But
yeah, I think that's probably the stage where it's got at most risk of falling apart, because that's where most of the nitty-gritty stuff comes out.
James, what advice would you give to a first-time acquirer?
my first piece of advice would be to get advice.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated process and one that I wouldn't recommend anyone do alone. Aside from that, I'd probably say for a first-time acquirer, maybe start small.
Yeah, of course.
Don't underestimate the level of time and input required once the deal is done to integrate that into your business. Culturally and operationally, it can be quite a drain. So I think don't underestimate that is probably what I would say.
So James, how do you think Scrutton Bland supports buyers in the process?
I think it's throughout the process really. From sort of going through the basics of a transaction all the way through to being at the end of a phone whenever we need to. And as we've alluded to, that sometimes the length of time involved in an acquisition process can be north of a year, and sometimes project fatigue sort of filters into that a little bit. So having someone on your side who's knowledgeable at the end of a phone is often more valuable than people expect. I think in the wider terms, we can also help with things that typical accountants can't. So we have a debt advisory team who can also assist in things like funding and acquisition. We typically find our competitors aren't doing that.
Yeah, I'd also add, we're part of a wider group, so oftentimes you can find other sellers within that business who would align with their synergies. So it's something that is quite advantageous for us, as we can find, sellers within another accountancy firm within our group who would align with our buyer.